Okay, so thanks for geeking out with me about sort of, how vaccines work and that sort of thing. Let's get down to the law in this case, starting with the issue, which is whether the vaccination law violated Jacobson's right to liberty, protected by the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment. And this time, Justice Harlan gets to be in the majority, despite the fact that he had just been in the minority in Lochner. Remember, these two cases were handed down in the same year. And Harlan here holds that the law was a legitimate police power exercise to promote public health. And remember, Harlan is all about, recognizing that elected officials have expertise that sort of judges don't. The basic logic of his opinion is that because the local board of health around the Boston area had determined that, like, okay, the outbreak is so bad now that vaccines are needed, that the way the law worked wasn't unreasonable nor imposed sort of like willy-nilly or arbitrarily. So what rule does Harlan use? Well, remember, this rule was in his dissenting opinion in Lochner. But in the majority opinion, now he gets to test it out in the majority opinion. And that is that courts can only strike down a state law if it has no real or substantial relations to any sort of like issue of health, safety, welfare, and morality, or if it is beyond all question just a plain and palpable invasion of some of the rights that we know are protected by the 14th Amendment. So it's trying to smoke out instances where the government goes to court and says, oh, no, 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 we absolutely need this law to promote, some police powers goal. But in reality, it doesn't. But it also tries to, give elected officials the benefit of the doubt. And then, this other part of the test is, even if it does promote a legitimate police powers goal, does it do so in a way that like clearly and terribly invades one of the rights that are protected by the 14th Amendment? And the liberty protected by the 14th Amendment isn't just about like grown adults can make their own economic decisions. It also has to do with whether grown adults get to have some control over their bodies. And we're going to see how the ability to control one's body in this case matters a lot to Harlan. But we'll get there in a couple slides. So what philosophy of constitutional interpretation are we seeing? We're seeing judicial restraint, right? That, giving the elected officials the benefit of the doubt, right? Is there a violation of a constitutional right? And Harlan says, well, no, you have to consider the circumstances. And consider the circumstances of like what happens when the country goes to war. If people were forced to join the army in peacetime, would that be an invasion of rights? Probably. But guess what? When you're in wartime, you have new problems and unique problems the government has to solve. And in those instances, the government can use strategies to solve those problems that it couldn't use in peacetime. So what's one of the strategies the government can use to fight a war successfully? The draft, right? Force people in, even if they think it's, against their religion, or even if like they politically don't agree with what the government is doing, they don't agree with the war, doesn't matter. Because the safety of the entire country is at risk. And it's like, well, how is this any different? I mean, it's not the country and it's not a foreign army. It's one city and a disease, right? But the same principle is in play here, that the needs of the entire community can be gravely impacted by a few people like trying to get out of, what they're supposed to do to help each other out, right? And then, does this law achieve a public health goal? Absolutely, right? So you can't claim that this is, the politicians are lying when they say that this is that vaccines are needed to end the smallpox problem. How far could the law have gone? And this is really interesting, right? So the punishment for disobeying the law, remember, is just a monetary fine. No police officer is going to show up at your front door and hold you down while a doctor or a nurse whips out, the needle or whatever they need to inject you with the vaccine, right? And so, um, in a sense, even though Jacobson is being punished for disagreeing with this policy, the punishment doesn't actually invade his bodily autonomy. It doesn't. Yeah, it's a punishment, and it kind of it sucks for him, right? But it's importantly a different kind of punishment than the cops just showing up and he has to get vaccinated anyways. So because that's if you had a law where the punishment was the cops are going to show up and force you to get vaccinated anyways, then we're talking about a different issue. But you know what? That's not the issue in this case. And so the way this particular law operates achieves a public health goal and does so in a way that doesn't end up with Pastor Jacobson losing control of his body. He just loses control over some of the money in his pocketbook. So what do you need to know come quiz time? You need to understand that like what seems reasonable as a regulation during sometimes might not seem reasonable in others, right? And so like, a draft might make sense in wartime, not in peacetime. A forcible vaccination law might make sense during an outbreak, but maybe during a time when there is no outbreak, we should think of it differently. You need to be able to sort of like relate the logic of that argument because there might be a short answer question on that. And then, you also need to be able to explain, why Harlan thinks it's so important that even though there's a punishment imposed, that it's the type of punishment that's imposed still allows Jacobson to have control over his body. And as you see on some of my quizzes, sometimes I just ask, like, do you agree or disagree? And I'm not looking for you to agree with my take. I'm just looking for you to offer any justification as to, do you think it's okay that, oh, well, we should uphold this law only because it imposes a monetary fine. He's not forced to do it. So that could be another potential short answer question. Anyways, I hope this helped, and I will see you in class next time. Thanks.